Bolt the GOAT, what do you think about the recent push by teams to go big? Seems counterintuitive to the space and pace small ball era we're in, but more teams seem to embrace starting multiple big men that have perimeter skills, i.e. the Timberwolves, Cavs, Grizzlies, even the Celtics. All those teams had great success last year when healthy, and the Timberwolves seem to make a lot of sense on paper. Is this a fad, or is this more indicative of the full realization of the modern big unicorn big man? I think it's more so the latter. And I think what teams are trying to do here is that you want to still maintain the ability to have a dynamic and diverse offense, but can you do it while also kind of upping your defensive ceiling? And so if you look at a lot of the teams that we roll through, yeah, Orlando was one of them, and they were not good on defense. But 4 of the top 10 defenses from last year started 2 bigs. Boston and Golden State, who were the 2 best defenses in the league, and then Cleveland was 6th, and Memphis was 5th. And so what I think teams are at least trying to do is that they want to give themselves a defensive edge with players and size who are not going to compromise their ability to go against the grain or be versatile on offense. And I think what they've also decided in some cases that it will be easier to figure out a way to be an elite offense while having 2 bigs, maybe when it's imperfect on offense, than it is to be like, hey, let's downsize and overcome that. And so you look at the Warriors would be a great example. They finished 17 in offense last year. But when Steph is on the court, they have that transcendent talent to carry them to well above average offensively. You trust in Boston. They were 10th in offense, so it was not the same case as Golden State, but to have someone like Jason Tatum, you trust that he's going to elevate your actual ceiling. Is it easier for him to do that than it is to downsize and play Jason Tatum himself at the 5 and still maintain a good defense and not worry about the wear and tear on his body as well? And so Cleveland would be like one of the best examples here. And even you could throw Minnesota, since it's going into the first year of this experiment for them, even though you had the Towns Vanderbilt dynamic last year. But Cleveland, like, they've decided to play basically 3 bigs at points and think that they can still drum up enough offense and that they're not going to be able to replicate that same versatility as easily on defense. And so if you think that it's size and then mobility, and length, some combination of the 3, if not all 3, is going to give you that pathway to an elite defense. And then because I do feel like it's easier for a singular player to have an impact on offense versus defense, where I do think it's more team and personnel dependent. And Rudy Gobert would be a perfect example. He punches your ticket to a top 10 defense on his own every single season. But if you get to the playoffs, you need like more defensive talent around him, or it's going to be easier to make life hell on him. And you could say offensively, you need the same thing. You don't just want the one player to run everything through, but over the longer term, it does feel like one player on offense can have a much bigger dent on the product, impact on the product in the higher leverage moments than someone on defense. And so if you think that this model is a way to really beef up your defense and maybe even counter some of the teams that are going small, we talk about how are the Timberwolves going to match up if the Clippers decide to downsize against them, for instance, in a playoff series or just a game. Maybe you're trying to force teams outside of their comfort zone. Do the Clippers, when they don't have the size to run 2 bigs, can you sort of beat them into submission there? And so I think those are the elements that go into it. But I mostly think that teams are always looking for like not cheat codes, but counters to what's happening, the new trends. This is just a natural counter, but it also feels like a conscious or maybe even subconscious decision that, hey, we can build like these terrifying defenses with size and dual bigs and then still just be good enough on offense, even if the fit is imperfect. And in places like Boston, it's not imperfect because Al Horford spaces the floor and you have Rob Williams as a passer running down the lane and also just like a lob catcher and good rim diver there. So yeah, there are times where it works out just fine. But even in a Memphis where maybe a Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr. aren't the ideal fit alongside one another, just because Jaren Jackson Jr. spaces the floor and Steven Adams can be your primary screen setter there, but Steven Adams is more limited offensively than a Robert Williams III to me. And Steven Adams is a fan. I know what he does for you on the offensive glass. So it feels like that type of a decision where teams are looking at this and saying, it's easier for us to cobble together really good offense if the personnel is imperfect, so long as we have that one sort of guiding force, than if you flip-flop it on the defensive end. And that maybe just the size is better to beat up on some of these teams that want to run smaller. Do I think this trend is here to stay? I honestly don't know. I think the Timberwolves might be the ultimate litmus test for this. And that's because it's such an extreme when you're looking at the pay that was allocated to it and the caliber of talent that's up front. This isn't like Draymond Green and Kevon Looney where there's one star and a non-star, or Al Horford sort of at the end of his prime or the end of his tail end of his career versus with Robert Williams III, who's at the beginning of his prime. Even Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, they're both at the beginning of their primes, and only one of them is expensive right now. So you haven't had to like make that extra pot commitment. And I think how Minnesota fares during the regular season, as well as in the playoffs, is going to say a great deal about whether this is something that catches on more so around the league.